You're listening to the Point. Ready or not, let's keep it real at Turning Point.
More often than not, the unexpected happens. Life comes with real challenges. The reason we're here is to have those hard conversations, to grow, and to realize we're not alone. Ready or not, let's start understanding more about the darkness of sexual assault from a woman who deals with this topic every day. Welcome to The Point. I'm your host, Debbie Taylor, the Executive Director of Turning Point, along with my co-host, Sherry, who is our nurse manager. And behind the scenes is Nikki on the mics. And then with us today is Krysta Montez, who is with Pinon, and just wanting to shed a little light on this topic because as it ties back to Juliana's story and so many of the women that have walked through our doors, that sexual assault is a real thing. It happens to more women than we realize, and we just wanted to invite you in and kind of expand on that. So do you want to just introduce yourself real quick and we'll get started?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Krysta Montez. First and foremost, I am a victim advocate with Pinon, and I'm also a prevention educator. So as a victim advocate, I work with victims of sexual abuse. We also have a child advocacy center, so sometimes I do work with children of abuse as well. As a prevention educator, I am out in the community and I am talking about the issue of sexual assault, bringing light to the issue, ways to better educate people on the issue of sexual assault, so that way too we can change, in a sense, this rape culture that's out there.
So when you're out in the community, do you feel like it's well received, or do you feel like people get nervous and kind of uptight when you start speaking?
So a lot of the times, we give like a fair warning and we're kind of like, this is what we're talking about today. We will be talking about sexual assault. If anything makes you feel uncomfortable, please step out and feel free to join us. Because again, with sexual assault statistically, 1 in 4 females may experience some form of sexual abuse by the age of 18, and for males it's 1 in 6. And so it is a touchy topic, and sometimes people don't want to hear it. They don't want to listen to it. And again, it's a tough issue, right?
It is.
Bringing up the issue of sexual assault. And again, we never know when someone around us may have experienced it themselves.
So what age range, or is there an age range where it's more likely to happen to an individual?
So we have to remember with sexual assault, sexual assault can happen at any age. We've had victims from, again, young children, all the way to 100 years of age and everything in between. I'm also part of a multidisciplinary team to end abuse in later life. So we don't want to disregard that these things happen to older adults as well. And I can say even from my own experience. So when I first started working with Pinon, and I always tell this story that, I really did think that I was going to be working with a lot of older adults, college students, because usually that's what we think of when we think of a typical victim of sexual assault. But the majority of clientele that we do see sometimes, or not sometimes, a lot of the times, is children. They're a vulnerable population, right? Mm-hmm. Perpetrators, they know that they can have power and control over this child. They know they can groom out this child, to not tell anybody, to manipulate them, to tell them, if you tell anybody, you're going to ruin our family, this is going to be your fault. And it's not their fault, right?
Right.
It's not their fault.
But those minds are so easily convinced.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And so just going back to like a little bit more about being a prevention educator and, prevention work, because that's where it starts. That's really how we're going to bring light to this issue, right? Because if people don't, know about it or talk about it, then again, we're not going to be able to we're not going to be able to help them as much as we need to. It starts with the education, and we do going in and talking about body safety, right? And having kids understand that your body belongs to you and nobody else. Letting them know that it's okay to speak up and say, stop if something doesn't feel right? Listen to your heart. That's the most important thing. Listen to your heart. And again, it's okay to speak up and tell. Right? Talk to a safe adult. Who are safe adults we can talk to, right? And so we start with that age group, and then we move on up and we start working with, middle school populations. So I work primarily with middle schoolers. And with that program, we're teaching youth to become peer mentors, or in a sense, mini advocates, right?
Nice.
So that way we can start with them while they're young, because, you guys can probably even think about this, right? We didn't have these conversations growing up, right? Nobody said, hey, it's okay to speak up and tell. Or nobody wanted to talk, like you said, nobody wants to talk about the issue of sexual assault. It's one of those things that was very kept hidden.
Well, and it takes a lot of energy and emotion to jump into that. I mean,
it's
kind of like, no, let's not.
Yeah, and it's a scary topic, right? Because we don't know what could happen. The best way I can describe it is that a lot of people, when we have this conversation about sexual assault, it's the fear of the unknown.
Yes.
Right? We have that fear of the unknown. What's going to come of this? Right? How are we going to talk about this? And it's understanding that we're trying to do a service, and we're trying to, educate. I can't say that enough, and how important education is when it comes to sexual assault, so we can end a lot of these underlying issues that have to do with it.
To come to the realization, okay, I need some help with this. Is there something that you kind of see across the board that is the struggle or the barrier between them getting help or requesting help? Or
I've seen before where people are uncertain of what happened because maybe the way that it made them feel, or the way our body reacts to something still doesn't mean that it's okay. Right?
So if it's somebody that's a friend.
So we have to remember that it's never okay, even if it's a friend or an acquaintance, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a husband, right? Even if somebody's been married for 100 years, they're not required to engage in sexual activity. And going back to that consent piece, right? We have to remember that with consent, yes means yes and everything else means no. We've been programmed to think that no means no, and yes, no means no, but it kind of is like saying that consent is implied until someone says no. Yes means yes, and everything else means no. And consent is an ongoing conversation. It doesn't just stop once the person says that they agree to it, right? With every sexual act, there must be consent, right? Having those conversations. And it's really key because, again, we want people to make sure that, that you're respecting the other person, and, it's a more mutually satisfying, engagement, I guess is the best way I can say.
And realizing that you can say no at any point, even if the intent was yes, and we're starting down this path.
Exactly.
The right to say no is always there.
Exactly. Because even too, if people agree at the beginning of, a sexual encounter that they want to engage in sexual activity, and again, like you said, at any point, if they decide, hey, you know what, I no longer want to do this, then fine. Or somebody says stop means stop.
I think the biggest thing that we see within our center, and the reason I asked you is because I know you have such a broader view of it, but I feel like the majority of clients, and you can tell me, Sherry, if you feel the same way, is that they have a hard time because they knew the person, so it was a friend, it was that, and so it's like, but I know this person, and he or she, they're not capable of this. And so I think we have in our minds this, okay, a perpetrator looks like this.
Oh yeah.
And it's not who did this to me, so it couldn't have been.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit, bringing some more education into this. So with perpetrators, especially media influences this a lot, right?
Oh my gosh.
Most of the time people think of perpetrators as strangers. Somebody jumping out of a bush, the creepy white van.
Stalker that looks like, oh my gosh, I'm about to get pulled in.
Yeah, the creepy white van. And unfortunately, no, they're people that we know because they've gained our trust. They've gained our trust. They gained the people around us their trust, get into our lives. And then eventually, people can become possible victims. Again, with perpetrators, they want this power and control over somebody.
Yeah.
I think one thing that confuses people, some of the girls we see, is drugs and alcohol. When that's involved, they feel like their defenses came down. And even though they didn't want to...
Oh, yeah. So even with drugs and alcohol, right? So the best analogy I can use for this is that if we know by law somebody cannot drive a vehicle while they're intoxicated, so what's the reason why they can't drive a vehicle while they're intoxicated?
They can't make good decisions.
Exactly, right? They're not thinking straight. They're not in the right mindset to make that decision and know what they're doing. And it's the same thing with sexual activity. When somebody's under the influence of drugs or alcohol, they can't consent to sexual activity because they don't know if that's really what they want to do. Alcohol is probably one of the most common things used in sexual assaults because there's access to it. But just because somebody's intoxicated does not mean that somebody has the right to sexually assault them. Right. It kind of goes back to, even with like victim blaming, where they'll be like, well, they were at a party or they were at a bar, so they asked for it or they deserved it. Right. No one asked to be sexually assaulted. No one wants that, and no one deserves that ever. Even if somebody's at a bar drinking or they're at a party, right? Maybe they just wanted to go and enjoy themselves. So that's another thing where I feel, we're going to be able to get people to come out and disclose more about sexual assault is if we can put an end to victim blaming, right?
Absolutely.
Quit saying that it's their fault. No, it's not their fault. The only person we blame is this perpetrator because they know that they can have power and control over that person to then sexually assault them. And it's a selfish act. It really is. I can go into victim blaming all day, but even with like what somebody's wearing, right, it has nothing to do with clothing, right? It has nothing to do with clothing. And I'll even go a little bit further, but it's like what we talked about earlier, where sexual assault can happen to anybody. It can happen to young children. It can happen to older adults. It can happen to males or females of any age, any race. So again, I don't think that, an older adult was wearing crop top and short shorts and was asking to be sexually assaulted. No one does.
And do we do that just to make it, in our heads, like there has to be a reason? Do you feel like people do that? The
victim blaming?
Yeah.
Because society, right? Society has really brought that upon things, right? Or even if we think of like gender roles, right?
Yeah.
Society has come up with these boxes to protect men and women. So, society says that in order for a woman to be considered ladylike or to protect themselves, they have to dress a certain way, they have to cook, they have to clean, they have to listen to their partner. And again, that's harmful. They start getting victim blamed because of, well, you didn't dress this way, so this is why this happened to you. Or somebody can think that they can disrespect that woman because she didn't dress a certain way, or, we start seeing those issues, or even with males, right? And I want to bring this up because I feel like it is important because we again, like you said earlier, we always disregard that these things happen to males, but these things happen to males just as often as women. But we have to think that society has trained males not to speak up and tell.
Yeah.
Right. So they're less likely to report because society has always said you have to be strong, you have to be tough, you have to be invulnerable to these things. So then if a male is sexually assaulted, whether it be by another male or a female, they're not going to want to talk about it. And also too, and I always bring this up when I'm out educating, especially with, the youth that I work with, is that I think the best way that we're even going to get males to come out, or females, either one, is if we encourage them. We support them and we say, hey, you know what? This was not your fault. You did not ask for this. You did not want this. You did not deserve this. And it's okay to speak up and report. It's okay to get help, right? There's no shame in getting help. And we have to change that view that society has, right? They start seeing them as like, you're weak, or, why are you crying? It's happened to me. You just brush it off too. Like, no, it's okay to get help.
Yeah.
And everybody's different. Right? There are people who do decide and say, hey, you know what? I want to handle this on my own. And that's their choice because that's their story, right? That's their truth. And whether they want to come out and speak it, we can't force them and be like, you have to tell me exactly what happened to you. And so within our agency, we encourage adults to report, right? 18 and over. Because again, they have that choice. Now, as far as children, we want to make sure that we are reporting any form of child sexual abuse, child abuse. Us as adults, we are their voice, right? And we want to make sure that they do get help. That way they can grow up and they can focus more in school. They can, be able to function better, right? And help them. And like I say, as adults, it's their choice, right? It's their choice to decide, hey, if I want to come out and report this, they have that choice to do that or not. We're not going to sit here and be like, hey, you need to come out and report it. Because like I said, it's their story and it's tough. It's like, imagine having to tell somebody about your last sexual experience from A to Z, right? And especially when it comes to sexual assault or rape, that's a tough one, right? How do you talk about that? How do you even start the conversation of that?
That's amazing. I love what you guys do. And I love your approach in letting them share what they want to. You don't have to share it all. I mean, you just really let them guide.
Yeah, and that's what we do. So that's our job as advocates. We're very victim-centered. We're like, what do you need? Right? It's about them in that moment.
And I think most people that are thinking, okay, I'm going to reach out for help. Oh, they're going to expect this. I think we have this anticipation of, oh my gosh, there's going to be so much into this, instead of, okay, I get to control this journey. And the first step is making that phone call, showing up at the office.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what we are. We're that support, right? We are that support. I want to say that I work with a great team of people. We all work together as one big team, literally. We have our prevention department. We have all of us are advocates. We have our case managers, we have forensic interviewers. So a forensic interviewer is someone who's trained in how to talk to children who have experienced some type of abuse. And they just have a conversation with them, right? Where, again, they're letting these children tell their truth about what things that have happened to them. And like I said, we're one big team. And so what's great about La Pinon is that we have a crisis line, a 24-hour crisis line. Again, this is open.
Go ahead and give us that number.
Yeah. So it's available 365 days a year, 7 days a week, all that good stuff, right? But our number is 575-526-3437. And somebody like myself would be there to answer and talk with you. And even if somebody does have questions, right, where they're not too sure if they have been sexually assaulted, I've even answered some of those phone calls too. And I'm like, okay, let's take a break for a second. But again, this really happened. Again, they can ask those questions, any type of information that they need or want. That's what we're there for. They can set up to come in and do a walk-in. And like I said, everyone's really friendly and nice, and it's not like a doctor's visit or anything like that, right? It's just a conversation, right? Just come meet with us, and so we can answer questions or see what we need to do. If that person chooses they want to report, or if they want counseling services, we offer those services. So,
and there's really no pressure. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say if you're listening to this today and you feel like you should call, you should call.
Yeah.
If you feel like you're asking the question, was I sexually assaulted? You were probably sexually assaulted. I mean, those aren't questions that we just randomly come up with. It's kind of like that little voice in us. I love what somebody called it, like Pinocchio's Jiminy Cricket.
Listen
Listen to that inside voice, make that phone call, take that first step. And if you're uncomfortable, hang up the phone.
Oh yeah.
Like, if you're uncomfortable, walk out of the office. It's your step, but definitely take it. So
yeah, definitely. And like I said, we encourage people, and it's always that first step, because it's a scary first step, and we really want people to get help so that way they can feel better and get the services that they need, because there's no shame in it. There's really none. We always say a positive outcome. And for me, I can always say that when I've worked with victims of sexual assault, and I see them from the beginning to the end, and they're a totally different person. They're smiling, they're happy, they're like, thank you so much for helping us to get here, because it's a journey, right? And I can't say that it's going to be 100% better, but we're there to make it as best as we can through that time.
Yeah. And we always say courage inspires us. And that's exactly how we feel when women walk through our doors. It's a tough decision, but when you face what's ahead of you and you have somebody there to deal with all that emotion and all that processing of what's going on, it's an incredible journey, and you see the other side. Yeah. And these men and women just blow your mind. It's amazing how incredible the journey is.
Yeah, it really is. And, people we're really resilient, right? We can bounce back, and, things do get better. And that's one thing I can say. Being an advocate for myself has probably been one of the most rewarding things, because, we're able to see people feel better, be happier, and be like, what? It was worth it, right? It was worth it. And it's just that first step coming through that door, and
awesome.
We're friendly, so good.
Well, Krysta, thanks so much for being here today. We appreciate what you do, and thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you so much.
Again, you can reach out to them locally. If you are not local, the National Sexual Assault Hotline is 1-800-656-4673, and that is a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week phone number. And you can also go to RAINN, RAINN.org, and they have someone that you can chat with online. And so we just want to thank you again for joining us today. Remember to like us, the podcast, leave us a review, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and always remember, stars can't shine without darkness.